Hello, hello, hello. Jordan Sheridan live. Status Coup. Apologies, a little bit late. You know the drill when you have a newborn and a dog that needs to be walked. Not enough hours in the day, but here and quite a lot going on. And we are continuing to follow up on both the East Palestine disaster, which honestly is a capital C cover up, in my view, as well as the Indiana plastics plant that had a major fire last week. And now, poof, suddenly those who have been evacuated can come home because the air is fine, the EPA tells us. So we'll get into that a little bit later. I just released a Substack piece that is related to this story that we're going to get into today. About a week or two ago, I started hearing and smash that like button, by the way, so we can get more people and more eyeballs on this. We already have 100 people watching, but as many people who press like, the more people will see. So thumbs up right under the video and share this live stream. So about a week or two ago, well, let me start over. So for those of you who've been watching, you know that February 3rd, a Norfolk Southern, a massive train between 150 and 200 cars with a lot of toxicants, highly flammable chemicals, derailed. Then 3 days later, Norfolk Southern, according to them, vented and burned 5 cars of vinyl chloride. I'm looking into that because, frankly, I don't particularly believe that those were all vinyl chloride. I think other things were burned as well. But let's stick with the 5 cars of vinyl chloride. Vinyl chloride, you could just look it up. Highly, highly toxic, highly flammable, causes several forms of cancer, particularly liver cancer, also known to cause brain tumors and other health problems, issues with reproduction for women, etc. So they exploded the vinyl chloride, and according to the EPA and Norfolk Southern's contractor who have been testing in East Palestine since then, we have shown you why, and Lewis has shown you, particularly Lewis has been doing amazing reporting, why the testing is highly questionable. We'll say that, highly questionable. So they've been saying they're not detecting vinyl chloride in residents' homes, etc. So about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks ago, I started hearing from certain residents that it was very difficult to get their urine tested for vinyl chloride. Some health providers were not providing it and saying they're not really allowed to because the CDC, which Center for Disease Control, I call it the Capitalism Defense Center. I think they did horrendous when it comes to COVID, but that's a different story. But the CDC was recommending against testing for vinyl chloride. I said, why is that? So I looked into it, and obviously the caveats, I'm not a chemist, I'm not a doctor, Lewis isn't either, but we cover these environmental catastrophes enough that we talk to experts and have accumulated enough knowledge to talk about this. So I said, why would the CDC be talking against residents getting tested for vinyl chloride? There were other chemicals and toxicants that were in those cars and leaked, but vinyl chloride, as far as we know, was the most dangerous. So I looked into it, and on first glance, vinyl chloride, it metabolizes fast in the body. So after exposure, it is believed that it leaves your body after 24 hours. So apparently the CDC's, the story they were sticking to was, well, we're not going to have residents test for it now because it would be gone already out of their system if they were exposed. That's under the assumption that they were only exposed to vinyl chloride in the days after this February derailment. That's apparently what the CDC's mindset and philosophy is based on. But why didn't they test all residents right away after this derailment? That's the first question. And why are you presuming that they were only exposed then and aren't testing now to see if there's any subsequent exposure? So I had a resident send me her vinyl chloride results. I interviewed her. There was some question about the testing and whether they did it right. So I told her, I think you should go back because the experts I spoke to said they tested you the wrong way. But then I saw a video, which we've obtained, which we're going to play parts of today, where a resident in East Palestine who has been very sick, not a relatively young guy, 48 years old, him and his family lived 200 yards. Let me repeat, 200 yards from where the train derailed and burned. He's had nosebleeds, headaches, burning eyes, and other symptoms, chest pains. His fiance has had rashes, among other symptoms. So he went down because he was having trouble getting a script. You know, your doctor has to write a script for certain blood tests or urine tests. So he went down to his local healthcare provider in the beginning of this month to try and get that script. Let's play. There's several clips. He recorded it. There's several clips from this, and then we're going to bring Eric on. But let's play the first part. He was at Mercy Health in East Palestine.
Our lab does not do the orders. They don't.
What if I have a prescription? Can you do it then?
We like you're asking Amy to give you a script.
No, I can get a prescription from another doctor to have it done.
Mercy Labs do not do that.
See here, when I talked to the other person from the Mercy Health, they told me it was because under this the guidelines of the CDC.
Who did you talk to from Mercy?
I talked to whoever the lady is on that you call and you get the automated
call center.
Yeah.
Oh, they're from Cincinnati. They have no clue what we're doing. I can tell you that right now.
Well, I'm just telling you that other people got tested for this, and
they didn't do it through a Mercy lab. Okay.
Okay.
Who would give you the script?
Dr. Chai said that he would write the scripts out for us.
Who's that?
Dr. Chai.
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
He's from town here. He's over there, and he's from Pennsylvania. But he says that he'll write me a prescription for it. It's finding somebody that'll do the test.
Okay.
Because I have it on video about the EPA guy saying, you know, that they're opening the tracks up too much at a time, and when they come up the north side of it, they're going to open it up in smaller increments. I can't leave because I have foster kids. I can't go relocate, and I can't get tested. I'm still, you know, Amy put me on antibiotics for 2 weeks, and I'm still sick. I'm like, I had blood coming out my ear. I've got bloody noses. My sore throat. My lungs are completely damaged. I'm going to get a CAT scan on that. I have a nodule on my lung from before because I got asthma. And, you know, Lori come down here, my fiance, and she was tested for chemical dermatitis is the diagnose, not the thing.
Right.
And it's like we're like 200 yards away from this, and I can't find nobody that'll test for the benzene, you know, and the vinyl chloride.
So that was the first clip. And this was not a doctor. I don't know if it was the front desk person or somebody with Mercy. So let's bring Eric on now and start from the beginning. Thanks for joining us, Eric.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's start from the beginning. You live with your family. You said you have some foster children. Very close.
I had 3 before this. And when we went down the first evacuation, I'm a treatment facility home. They had some behaviors and were removed from my home. These were kids I had for 3 years. 3 years. The one all I had to do was go to court and sign the adoption papers.
Wow. And you said they were removed because
of behaviors. You know what? It was because we were taken from our home. The home was a safe place. I have cameras in all the common areas in my home. That's why they was taken. They keep on asking me, and under HIPAA law, I can't really go into too much detail about it, but they keep on asking me down at the help center why was they removed. And I keep telling them because your train derailed. And that's all they needed to know.
Right. So 200 yards, the train is basically on your property.
It's 0.3 miles.
Okay. Got it. And you, right after, talk about the smell, the immediate symptoms. What happened?
The immediate symptoms were your eyes were burning, nose running, sore throat. The headaches were excruciating. Still to this day, if I leave town for a couple hours and come back in, I have splitting headaches again. It's like we went to Florida because we had our house, the inside of it, tested through JS Held. Um, when I came back from Florida, or when I was in Florida, the second day I was there, it was like a detox. I got so sick, I slept for 24 hours. Um, my body was shaking. I was in cold sweats. I couldn't leave the hotel room. After a while, I started feeling better, and then when we came back here, as soon as we got back into town, we both had headaches again. And Lori, which is my fiance, started getting rashes again. So I started getting worried. I did. I did a lot of research on what's going on. I've talked to a lot of people, and it's I talked to Miss Walker, which she sent your results, and she tested positive. I figured if she tested positive, I better go get tested myself because it's an expensive test. Your insurances are not covering this test. It's $900 for this test for the
Wow.
benzene and the vinyl chloride.
So you
I
have to
can't
pay out
test
of
my whole
pocket.
family. Yeah, you have to pay. Well, you don't have to pay out of pocket. I mean, they bill you, but it's still good. You know what I mean? It is what it is. You better show some proof of insurance or they're going to bill you right there on the
Right.
spot. I showed, I was on workman's comp, so I had a care source card. So I showed them that. Care source don't cover it, so I get billed for it.
Right. And you were there right when it derailed, controlled burn. You left for a little bit and then came back.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Talk about your fiance. She's had rashes. What else?
She has myasthenia gravis, so she has an autoimmune disease already. She
Okay.
has a pacemaker and defibrillator. Her rashes is anytime she touches any surface, she gets a rash. She was very active. This has made her almost bedridden. She's tired. You start losing like memory loss, short term. Your eyes are burning. It's the same thing. Everybody, and this is what kind of pisses me off about it, that they're using the stress as the same symptoms as what we're feeling, but they're not adding that we have a chemical taste in our mouth like a metal. They're not adding that. I'm sorry, my eyes don't burn from stress unless I'm
Right.
tired and been up all night. Now I want to sleep all day.
Right. And the whole town didn't altogether
Yeah,
get
we all don't
stress
got the
related.
same stress level.
Right.
It's like, don't play games with me. I've been to the EPA office. I've spent probably 4 or 5 hours there. I went to the new clinic. They gave me an attitude when I asked them to read my results because when they sent me my results, I didn't know what it said. So I called the Columbiana toxicologist because the ETPA gave me the number, and he was like, "If you're testing positive for it, that means you're being continuously exposed." I said, well, this goes against everything everybody's saying.
Right. Absolutely. So let's move on. So you went to the doctor. I showed the first clip. Right away, it's very clear that there's some bureaucracy going on here. They said, oh, well, the number you called, that's Cincinnati. They don't know what we're doing, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Let's play the next clip, Colin.
There's nothing to test for. There's a certain time frame they're telling us it has to be done.
But even if I'm paying for it out of pocket, even though there's a certain time frame, why can't I still get the test just at a good?
You know what? I'm going to have you talk to one of the nurses.
Okay.
If it's a daily exposure, there's no time limit.
Because
you were just exposed.
Well, that's the problem I'm having here. We're being exposed daily, so they don't want to say they know that it's out of your urine.
They're saying it's a time frame from exposure. That's what it
So
is.
what if I pay for my own test and I don't care about the time frame?
See, and when that video first started, they already had a 15-minute meeting when I was standing there and there wasn't nobody there. had a 15-minute meeting back there all together before that video, at the beginning of that video. It was, I stood there and stood there, and, I played really stupid. I'm not as stupid as it seems like on that video. That was all part of how I have to work this. You have to play stupid and keep on asking the same exact questions, because every time you ask that question or brought up the CDC, you got a little more info and a little more info. And that's how I played it.
Right. And what's interesting to me is the woman says they're saying that you have to test for it right away. They will find out later is the CDC.
Every time it was they.
Yeah.
They. That's what I heard.
Yeah. But the thing is, that is under the assumption, because vinyl chloride metabolizes very quickly. Within 24 hours, it can be. So they're assuming that, well, we're not going to test people a month later, or in your case, 2 months later, because if they got exposed, it would not show up already. That's under the assumption that they're not continually being exposed, which I don't think the CDC would know, because the CDC is not doing testing, and the EPA's testing, as we've shown, I wouldn't put a lot of stock in it.
It's inadequate. It came from the supervisor of the EPA's own mouth. It's inadequate.
Right.
Testing at 0.1 VOC is inadequate.
Right.
So they come in and they say your home's safe, and everybody, I've got a lot of bashing on Facebook and things because of what I've said, but because they're believing the EPA, they're believing the CDC, and they're definitely believing our city politics. That's a big issue that I'm having right now. They're testing at 0.1 VOCs. This stuff is in the millions and billions. Why are they testing at 0.1? And they said, the guy from the EPA says, well, our testing don't go no lower. So the testing that they did in our home and the same one are hanging out in the telephone poles and in the streets, they're inadequate. He sat there and admitted the only thing that's adequate is the bus that drives around here. And if you go down to the EPA office, it goes down one lane, one spot, turns around and comes back to its destination. That's how it works.
I want to play for the audience, Colin, if you have that clip, so we know what you're referring to. Lewis has talked a lot about this in his reporting, but at a community meeting, I think at the end of March, an EPA official basically acknowledged that the equipment they're using to test, he was saying specifically for butyl acrylate, but Lewis's reporting shows it's for other things too, that their equipment is actually not capable of picking up certain levels of the contaminants that they call low, that even if they're low, can still cause health problems. Let's play the EPA official acknowledging this.
The machines, both the machines that were used in the homes and the machines that are hanging on the telephone poles, some of those are multi-gas meters where we can see hydrogen chloride and carbon monoxide, a bunch of other gas sensors. But they also have that photoionization detector, which is that volatile organic meter. It goes down to 0.1 parts per million. Now, the problem with that is our vinyl chloride action level is the long term was 500 parts per billion, which is 0.5 parts per million. So just above that level of detection, right? The butyl acrylate is after the emergency phase, we drop that down to 20 parts per billion. So we can't see that lowest level of that machine. All right, that's important. But you can smell butyl acrylate at much lower levels. So yes, there is a chance that chemical could be present, and we don't see it with that machine. I mean, you need to understand that, right? Butyl acrylate, butyl acrylate's an irritant, right? It can cause some of the symptoms that people have presented. If that is what's causing it, I don't know. But again, we can see to a certain threshold with those machines.
But every time we go, they say something about it. They spoke your test, your house tested with this little machine, and it's like, and I know, doing my research, that machine doesn't mean anything anymore. It really doesn't, because if they go below that 0.1 level, your flooring, your walls, your paint, your plastic, everything throws off VOC.
That's right. So it only tells you if you have a serious problem, right? So what I would be concerned about.
Death. That would almost be death at 0.1.
What I'd be concerned about with volatile organic monitoring is the vinyl chloride, because the vinyl chloride is a cancer-causing agent. you don't want that. You don't want exposure to vinyl chloride, right? If you have a low level butyl acrylate exposure,
Winning.
if you have a
Everybody
low,
come to my funeral in 5 years, thank you.
if you have a low level butyl acrylate exposure, it's an irritant, right? It's not going to cause any long.
So there's so many things with that. First of all, if you have a serious problem, well, what about if you have a medium problem? What about if you have a low level problem? Because for some people with autoimmune issues, asthma, older, just, so, you know, one person could test for butyl acrylate at a certain point and it not affect them. Another person could test for butyl acrylate, and if your machine can't pick it up, it could really fuck them up. Same thing with other contaminants. So the fact that the EPA is acknowledging, we're not going to pick up certain levels. And as Lewis has reported, that's not just for butyl acrylate. He was trying to make it seem that it's only for butyl acrylate. There's a lot of toxicants that the equipment they're using, it's basically testing for like hazardous levels that you would see in a factory or something, not lower levels that could be in a house that could cause health problems. All right, so we've established that. We've established that they're telling you, we're told that there's nothing to test for because you only could test for vinyl chloride after the initial exposure, which they're basically saying the only exposure we're considering is right after in February. There is no problem. We're not detecting vinyl chloride, so we're not going to test you for it. Okay, let's smash that like button. We have almost 500 people watching. This is very important.
So far, we have the EPA's full of shit. Now we have the CDC's full of shit. So it goes on further where we can prove NS is full of shit. So and now our health care providers are full of shit. So who do we got to turn to?
So I think this is really important. It's a crime that this isn't being reported in the media because, I mean, at the end of the day, people cannot make decisions for themselves and their families if they don't have real information. Yep. And that's not just East Palestine. This is everywhere. We're going to talk about Indiana later. Let's play the next clip, which is more direct, that they're saying the CDC is telling them not to do the testing.
Okay, so we actually just were talking to the doctors and that. So they have to go by whatever Mercy's telling them. Unfortunately, we're not getting answers either.
Well, see, here's the thing, and this is me being honest. I called up at Mercy Health up in Portland. They told me that it's the CDC guideline that I cannot be tested for it through Mercy Health because of their guideline. Okay, so if it comes out of my pocket and you're my healthcare provider, you guys are my healthcare provider, why can't I pay out of pocket, even though that I understand there's a timeline for this, but I'm still being exposed because I'm 200 yards away from it? Yeah. Why can't I have that test done if I pay for it out of pocket?
So they have not got the okay from higher up. See, we're just in office through them.
I know where you guys are at.
We're not getting all the answers either. All we have been told is that Mercy, the whole Mercy system, and you're right, it is everywhere. Mercy is everywhere. Why aren't we getting answers? I don't know. I can't answer that.
Here's what I was told by this lady. Here's where the CDC also gave you guys that guideline not to do that.
So all they said was that the CDC doesn't recommend it, and that it now, from just speaking with our doctors that are here today, they said that, it has to go through who your provider is. So whoever your provider is, we could send them a message and see if, but we can't do the testing here. We don't have the.
No, I understand that, but can I get a prescription from my doctor from here to get that done, and I'll pay for it out of pocket?
And that's what we just discussed. We would have to. Who do you see here?
Amy.
So she's not here today, so I didn't get to get her, her opinion or whatever she's.
Because I know it costs $600 to get this done.
It's very expensive.
And I don't care to pay it because the CDC is saying that there is a time frame, and I feel that they're holding us back from us because that we're going to test positive in our urine, and there's no time frame there.
Like I said,
I'm not killing the messenger at all.
I know we don't have all the information yet. This is all new to everybody, So
I gotcha. But I just don't see how some facilities smaller than Mercy Health is testing for it.
Well, you gotta especially here, we're not like a full-on lab. So especially here, we can draw for blood. But like even when the doctors try to go in here and search up those tests, they don't come up in our system.
What if I went to the Mercy Health in like downtown or Boardman? They're still not gonna do it, right?
So we have all the same system. So I'm just telling you what our providers just told me.
All right. That's a little bit longer, but the core, we're not being, we're not getting answers. All we're being told is the CDC. CDC recommends not testing for it. Very interesting, Eric, because with COVID, their guidance, their recommendations, you couldn't miss it. You go to their website, it's right there. Their Twitter, it's right there.
I called the CDC. I called the CDC myself after this, and I asked to talk to somebody from the CDC. I got hung up on.
Wow.
Hung up on.
Because they didn't want to talk to you, or?
Because I was calling them out. And they didn't want to hear it. They wanted to get the people that answer the calls are, they're subcontracted off the CDC, so they can sit there and hang up on you or lie to you. The CDC can't. Right. I had enough. I had enough evidence at that point in time and it was already spread pretty quick. I don't know if I spread it too quick, but I think it already got back to them. Either that, or they're watching pretty closely. And that's part of my feelings also. This all started out because my liver enzymes were sky high. And, that was part of one of the reasons why I was going down there and I was griping about it. Because I want to know why my liver enzymes was as high as they were. And I still
did you have any major health problems before?
No, I didn't have no major health problems before. I have, high cholesterol and stuff like that. I cook a lot of food and I eat like a hog, but no, nothing like that. And it's like, you're telling me that there's nothing wrong and I feel something wrong. And the only person that you can trust is your gut. And my gut's telling me when I'm sitting in there on the toilet that there's a problem here.
We're going to get to it because you did test for elevated levels of vinyl chloride. So the tests don't lie. Your levels were elevated. That's according to a chemist I spoke with. And just looking it up, your levels were elevated. But I want to get to, because it gets worse, actually. It gets more nefarious. I'm not somebody who across the board says never trust the EPA, never trust the CDC. I'm not saying everybody is a bastard and they all lie, but you have to look on a case-by-case basis. And in this case, why weren't they testing you and your neighbors right away for vinyl chloride? Why aren't they doing, why are they just assuming there's no vinyl chloride exposure a month later, 2 months later? There's weather changes, toxicants move with weather and other patterns. So the fact that they weren't testing in the beginning, the fact that they weren't testing a month after, your test was 2 months later, highly, highly questionable. But then you get to that they tell you the CDC's saying they're urging us not to. I want to read from a chemist what he told me also about your test. Colin, let's start with the first section. So TDGA. So actually, let's show your test results first because it won't make sense without your test results. Let's show Eric's test results. So Eric got tested beginning of this month. Could you go to the part you highlighted? Second page. Yeah. Do you have it in yellow like you did for the Substack piece, Colin? All right. Well, he's getting it because I told him to highlight the part because it was small. But by the way, Colin, I think that's the other person's test. Here we go. So this is Eric's test. So under vinyl chloride metabolite, thiodiglolic acid, hope I'm pronouncing that right, 0.60 mcg/ml. So the reporting limit is 0.50 mcgs /ml, and thiodiglolic acid, that is the marker for vinyl chloride exposure that you metabolize. So that's what you look for. The creatine level is not really the exposure level. The thiodiglolic is the exposure level. So you're at a 0.60. So I want to read what a chemist told me I spoke with 2 other people too, but I just got the screen comments from him. So you can put it up, Colin. So the thiodiaglolic acid, that's what TDGA in urine, cannot be attributed to vinyl chloride exposure with absolute confidence. There are many factors that affect the timing and degree of TDGA in urine. So a single snapshot of urine TDGA cannot be used to measure the magnitude of exposure. It does, however, indicate a recent exposure. Let me repeat, recent exposure to toxicants that result in you went too fast. Result in TDGA metabolites. So I consider the CDC recommendation to be flawed and uninformed at best, negligent and cynical at worst. Keep going. Perhaps that the CDC representative thought that the TDGA would be undetectable by this time, or that if it was detected months after the disaster, it could not be attributed to vinyl chloride exposure. What they may not have considered is the possibility of subchronic exposure to vinyl chloride or vinyl chloride degradants, such as, and I'm definitely going to botch this, so sorry about that, chloroethylene oxide, chloroacetylene, or chloroacetic acid. Keep going. There was 0.60 mg/ml in this resident's urine. If we assume all of the TDGA was from vinyl chloride exposure, best case assumption, 100% of vinyl chloride ended up as TDGA, that's the thiodiaglolic acid, also best case assumption, and that the TDGA levels were at a steady state, not a best case assumption, but the single snapshot of urine level and complexity of vinyl chloride pharmacokinetics demand this assumption, then 0.60 in urine indicates exposure of 200 micrograms of vinyl chloride per day, far beyond the threshold for, let me make sure I have that right. Far beyond, I want to make sure, hold on. Far beyond the threshold of toxicological concern limits employed for pharmaceuticals. So that's important. The chemist is saying your levels are far beyond what's considered acceptable. And by the way, most of these levels and what they claim are acceptable is bullshit, as Aaron Brockovich explained last week. While not a smoking gun, these results strongly support the notion that East Palestine residents have been subject to subchronic exposure, translated to dumb it down, consistent exposure, continued exposure to vinyl chloride and vinyl chloride degradants from water, soil, and on in surfaces and structures. Vinyl chloride and vinyl chloride degradants are not chemically, physically, biologically persistent like dioxins. So the levels can be expected to wane over time, along with the degree of subchronic exposure. But this urine sample was taken more than 2 months after the disaster. Although there are many factors that modulate the pharmacokinetics and rate of elimination of vinyl chloride in humans, it is not so variable that urine TDGA in early April could reasonably be attributed to exposure in February. It is clear that exposure to the vinyl chloride or vinyl chloride related compounds is continuing today in subchronic fashion. There's more to that, but I'll just leave it at that for now. So Eric, a lot of complicated words, but what the chemist is saying is this happened in February. If you're testing at elevated levels in April, that means you're still being exposed.
Well, we'll go back what that supervisor of the EPA said in that same meeting, that he's opening up. They was opening up too much of it at a time, so they're going to come up the south track at smaller increments. We'll also go back to him saying that after 2 months, it dropped from reporting rate from 0.5 to actually 0.2. So it's a little more severe than, I found this out from the Columbiana County, toxicologist about him saying about the 0.5 to 0.2. After 2 months, it should, they lowered it for residential.
Right. And by the way, paraphrasing from Aaron Brockovich, a poison is a poison is a poison. I have seen in my reporting in Flint and elsewhere, the levels that they say are acceptable for whether it's lead or vinyl chloride or ethyl hexyl acrylate or chloroform or chromium or name your toxicant, it's most of the time not actually based on public health. It's based on other things. What might not affect one person might destroy another person, and it's completely arbitrary. It's completely arbitrary. For most of these things, you don't want any levels in your blood or urine. And the fact that a lot of the standards that they set for vinyl chloride or other things come from hundreds of billions. Let me repeat, hundreds of billions of dollars of lobbying from chemical companies, from manufacturing companies who lobby so that the levels will be put at X, Y, and Z for acceptable so that they can dump toxins in water and air and soil, you name it, and it not trigger the EPA's threshold. So you really have to, don't take my word for it. You could look at Aaron Brockovich has talked about this extensively. There's plenty online. A lot of these acceptable levels, I think people get a false sense like, oh, well, the EPA says it's safe. It's at the safe level. Well, you got to look underneath the hood because it's not necessarily safe to have. Would it be safe if he had 0.40 of thiodiglolic acid, which is the marker for vinyl chloride? Well, according to the CDC, yes. According to if you have a fucking brain, no, that would not be safe. At Smash the Like button, we got 600 people watching. This is very, very important. We got more clips to show because a doctor shared that he agrees with you that it should be tested for.
And it was alarming what he says.
Yes, it's very alarming what this doctor says. In fairness, I don't think they knew you were recording, but at least he tells the truth. So I'm not slamming the doctor who agreed with you, but it is alarming that what he said, because he basically said, I agree with you. And they're not doing it because they don't want the truth to come out for political and legal reasons. Let's play the next clip, Colin.
He wants us to go ahead and send a message to Amy and see if Amy would be willing to write him just the script that he can take to one of the places that are able to test.
Because
what do you want to test for?
Vinyl chloride and benzene.
Okay.
I already had my baseline done and my liver enzymes are high.
Oh, okay.
So I live 200 yards away from the tracks.
Terrible thing, isn't it?
What happened is the CDC gave the guidelines to Mercy Health, because I already found this out, that about the testing. Okay, so I called the CDC yesterday, and the lady hung up on me because you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I'm questioning it.
Well, there's nothing with Mercy Health. They don't even test for any of these things. The CDC says there's nothing to be tested. That's what they told us right along. I talked directly to the EPA.
But who are they to play God that I can't be tested for my own provider?
I agree with you there. So that's the question.
I'd agree with you there. And that's a good question. So he's agreeing with you. And he's saying the CDC is the one telling us not to test. Okay. Yeah. Let's play the rest.
So I'll tell you one other story about this. See, I contacted LabCorp.
Okay.
See, we're doing things behind the scenes here. And I said to LabCorp, we contact a regular representative. Then I talked to the head of the division for he was the head of Ohio LabCorp. And I said, these people want to be tested. They want to be tested for something here. What am I going to test them for? There's vinyl chloride, there's this. Well, we don't have a test for this. We don't have a test for that. We don't have a test for that. And I said, well, what do you have a test for? Well, he said you can test for benzene. I don't know what that's going to get you, but you can. And you can test for vinyl chloride. They do have that. Or ethylene chloride. Or you want for vinyl chloride, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you can do that. So I said, well, can we do that? How do we do this and this and that? Oh, I don't know. I'll have the president of the chemicals division call you. Well, the president of the chemicals division can never call me. And then there was something about, somebody said supposedly that the politics are mixing in there. that they don't want to be testing for these kind of things because they're involved in the
Well,
lawsuit.
this is what I was telling her. I got a guy on the EPA sitting there saying that they opened up too much at a time, cleaning up these railroad tracks, and now they want to come in and do it on the north side in smaller increments because they're releasing too much chemicals in the air.
Yeah.
Then I also have him on there saying when they came into our home, they're testing at 0.1 VOCs. Okay, that's not sufficient when they're in the billions. You know what I mean? So they're saying that it's safe.
With Dr. Watt.
Do you have an appointment, Dr.
Yes.
Watt? Okay.
They're ready to check in.
Oh, okay.
Whenever you're ready.
So they're saying that the test at 0.1 VOCs is not sufficient. I got the guy from the federal EPA saying this to me. We had a unity
Right,
council.
I understand.
They're saying that it's unsafe, but yet it's I'm bouncing around and I'm getting sick.
So we're hearing the politics is mixing into this, and they don't want to test for it because they're involved in a lawsuit. I don't know if he's talking about the CDC or the EPA. The EPA sued Norfolk Southern. As far as I know, the CDC is not involved in that lawsuit. Regardless of who he's talking about, he's basically saying this is political, and for legal reasons, they don't want to test. Well, I don't know. You got a town of 4,500 people. I'm talking to a lot of them on a daily basis that are still having nosebleeds, that have dizziness, chronic headaches, burning eyes, chemical burns. Some are having diarrhea, not to mention the kids who are running around creeks and other things and the long-term damage to them. And you're saying, well, politics and, well, I'm not bashing the doctor. He's just relaying what he was told. But that's pretty fucking scandalous, if you ask me, that you're not testing. Again, should have tested to start. We're talking in February, but you're not testing now. And by the way, it's not just you. Colin, let's show the other resident. This is Paul Walker. His test was from a month after. So Eric's was from 2 months after. This is from a month after. And Paul's test was basically around the same as you, 0.61. 0.61 under the thiodiaglolic acid. Let me read what his wife is telling me are his symptoms. He's got really bad cough. He's got 1 second. Bad headaches, coughing, fatigue, and shortness of breath, 47. And they're doing more testing on him, but she's saying these doctors don't know nothing about this, which is common. A lot of the Flint doctors didn't know much. And I want to bring in Melissa Mays. I wanted to bring her on because other than Erin Brockovich, she's basically the Erin Brockovich of Flint, because Melissa will tell you. Melissa, they're saying that it's only, we're not testing because there's nothing to test for. The vinyl chloride would only show up after exposure, which they're basically saying is the initial exposure. So they didn't test initially, can't find what you're not looking for. And they residents like Eric have to run through hoops, but they're making it seem like, well, if the test shows, I don't know, 0.40 of vinyl chloride, then you're fine. Well, no, you're not fine. Can you explain, whether it's vinyl chloride or other things, why these action levels are about as safe as Norfolk Southern trains?
Right, and carrying Flint water. So what you want to look at is on those test sheets, which I'm by the way, I'm wicked sorry for what you're going through. You guys, it's watching my language. I have one of those days. It's the exact same thing that they've been doing to us in Flint. One, they wouldn't test the adults for lead. They wouldn't test anybody's urine for the Legionnaires, the bacteria that killed hundreds of people, bacterial pneumonia that killed people. They wouldn't test them for the antigen until after 18 months, but it's out of your body then. Then also, when we finally got them to test people's water, they cheated. Then when they finally got them to test people's blood, they did the finger prick test. And the CDC itself says that you only use that for immediate one-time exposure, not long-term exposure. So then they hid, they lied, but then they would tell you, like, the action level for lead is 15 parts per billion in your water. Great. So then they let people believe that if you had 14 or lower, that you're safe. However, the only safe level of lead in your water is 0. So what they do is they'll do things like with the blood work and the urine test. It says the reporting limit is 0.5. That does not mean that you're safe at 0.4. That does not mean you're safe at 0.1, any of that. It just means they're reporting it. Now, the great question is reporting it to who? Should be the health department, and that should be something you should be able to FOIA. How many people have had this reported? But the problem is the hurdles. The hurdles, I had to drive all over Michigan and Ohio to try to get a lab. Actually, after I left East Palestine, it was about impossible. They told me the closest lab to test me for benzenes in my blood and some of the dioxins that I need to get tested, I would have to drive to North Carolina to do. Because where we're at, and my doctor was very clear, and he said this back in 2015. He said, look, it's not supposed to happen to us. This is not supposed to, we're not supposed to be exposed to this. This is supposed to be a first world country. We're not supposed to have any of these problems. Well, that's not the way it works. And we're not set up for it. What they are set up to do is do exactly what they've done with your doctors. They also told the doctors in Flint, do not talk about the water if your patients ask about it. If they do ask about it, here's what you can tell them, and gave them canned answers. I got lucky because my doctor is an older gentleman who doesn't like being told what to do, especially having a government tell him how to talk to his patients. So he told me straight out, he was like, look, I'm going to tell you right now, you're being poisoned. I don't know what these things are because it's a first world country. We're not trained in these types of things, but I'm going to send you to somebody who does. So he referred me to, it was an hour away. Insurance didn't pay for it. Same issues you're having, to go to an environmental physician to get the types of tests we needed, but then getting a lab that can actually process the tests and everything. So that's another issue, and process them properly and not damage or lose the samples. So I've been reading y'all's test results, and it's the exact same thing in Flint. So yeah, what it is buying them time for it to no longer be in your system, and for them to give you the runaround thing you have to pay for it. I don't know why. See, this is how insurance works. If there's a diagnosis code and there's symptoms and there's been exposure, your insurance should cover it. Why does it not is interesting to me. It's interesting they're saying, well, your insurance is not going to cover this. However, you're having all of these severe symptoms. You're enough to where your doctor wrote you a prescription for these lab tests, and they're like, well, insurance isn't going to cover it. Why not? Why not? Obviously, there's a health problem. Did you not know about the train derailment? Like, seriously? So that's one thing that set me off. And then also, too, the runaround and the fact that the CDC is saying, well, it has to be done within a certain area because, once again, they're trying to say you were only exposed in the initial crash and explosion. And if it's still testing in your system past 24 hours, you're still being exposed. And they're going to be ignoring that like they did in Flint, saying, oh, it was just basically the day of the switch. That was your day of exposure, not the 9 years that we've been continually exposed.
We're getting these papers in the mail every single day, and this is about the testing. It says there have been no health risk detected by any test conducted by the government or independent labs. Now they're so full of shit. You know what I mean? Because the independents are saying way different than what they're saying. And this is the stuff that's going into people's head that they're putting in our mailboxes every single day. The same way they put in our mailbox every day that this is stress-related symptoms. Now, I know the damn difference between stress-related symptom and
right.
You know what I mean? It's like it's the biggest crock of shit. I sent my test results to the mayor. I have showed him pictures of my fiance's test results. He looks at it, and I can't even get a common courtesy of a kiss my ass from him. And I posted it all over. I took a screenshot of it and posted it on Facebook because this is where we are now. He sat down there and said, oh, a lady asked, why haven't you got legal counsel? Because his exact words were on that meeting. If we get legal counsel, they will shut funding off. NS will shut funding off. It's on video. It's a 2-hour video. So what's that telling me? You're paid off. And I don't care what anybody says.
Absolutely. And also, the poisoners, this is why Flint is still poisoned, is because the state of Michigan and the city of Flint, the people that poisoned us, have been in charge of our recovery, which is why we don't have one, which is what I've been screaming about, East Palestine and the surrounding areas. Now it's pretty much going to be all of Ohio, and then now throw Indiana in there, and then Pennsylvania, and everywhere that it's floating because, contaminants move. But when you let the poisoners be in charge of the recovery, all it is CYA for them. It is not, who cares if they cut off funding that they're taxing people for it anyways and punishing for it anyways. And it's not enough So yeah, you need attorneys in there to preserve your rights and to fight, because you need somebody who's not going to be on the side of the poisoners. Because as long as Norfolk Southern and the state of Ohio is allowing Norfolk Southern to do this cleanup and to do this, wide bribery or whatever they're doing, throwing little bits and pieces, the people are still going to suffer. That's why Flint is still suffering, because we have no recourse. We have to sue the state constantly to beat them up, and then we have to sue to try to bring in the federal government, because the state refuses, the state's rights refuses to bring the federal government in unless you pressure and beat them up.
These
And that's
million
what's
dollar
going on here.
donations, these $1 million donations, why haven't they used some of it to test our fucking kids?
Because
Why?
that's a long-term problem, and they don't want to know that. It's why they wouldn't test the adults. They would test
Why
the
they
kids.
set up a long-term health clinic in our town for free? You know what I mean? All this shit doesn't make sense.
Because they're telling people it's in their head.
I also want to bring up, and by the way, we got 700 people watching, so smash that like button. By the way, folks, I'll be hitting the road probably next week. I might stop by East Palestine. I'm going to Flint, going to Kalamazoo, who's also being poisoned in Michigan. So we're going to do a mini toxic tour. Next week is Flint's 9-year anniversary. They still have toxic water 9 years later. They still don't have Medicare for all, among other things. As far as I know, we're the only news outlet in America still covering Flint. So if you can, if you're new here, consider signing up to support expensive on-the-ground reporting. StatusCoup.com/join. StatusCoup.com/join. Become a member for $5 to $10 a month. But Eric, I wanted to bring up an important point. It's not only the fact that, by the way, I reached out to the CDC twice. Apparently, they don't have an answer because they didn't respond. So I reached out to them. Why are you recommending this? I have chemists telling me that they're having continued exposure, not just the first week. They didn't respond. But secondly, it's bad enough that the CDC is doing this, but what happens when people like you, and there are other people who are getting scripts, getting scripts from other doctors that are writing the scripts, and they're testing positive too? What happens then when you get this paperwork? You don't have anyone to actually explain what it means to you. Your doctors either don't know what it means, or don't know how to treat it, or won't treat it because they're afraid of possibly their funding being Melissa could tell you about that in Flint. So you could get the results, but you don't actually have a system and an infrastructure of healthcare there to tell you what to do.
No.
Is that right?
You know what? This is the first time in my life I think I've ever been afraid. And it ain't just for me; it's for the kids and the people in this town. It's the people that are against me. I keep telling them, listen, I value your opinion, but I care about you and your child, whether they think so or not. And I'm going to continue the fight if you're going to bash me or not. I don't care. I will
Well, the bottom
continue.
line is, it doesn't matter. Listen, personalities, activists fight, residents fight. I see it every community I go, but the results are the results. So you have elevated levels
against each other, and that was part of their plan from day one. They found the clique, and this town it's a little town, but it's full of cliques. They found a clique, and now that we're getting bashed by the cliques.
But my point is, you, through being proactive, got tested, and you have high levels. So if, let's say, in a perfect world, insurance wasn't a thing and everybody could get tested tomorrow, how many people have elevated levels of vinyl chloride in East Palestine?
Everybody in this town. Everybody on my street. They found testing of benzene and vinyl chloride 3 miles away. How far does it go? Does it go to Canada? Does it go to Flint? You might be getting double dosed up there, and my prayers to Flint. You know what I mean? We don't know how far this actually went because we got lied to from day one. Day one. We don't know how far this went.
I want to read the rest of this quote from a chemist I spoke to, because it goes to that the CDC should have been doing this from day one. Colin, if you have the rest of that, it starts with, in my opinion, the CDC failed to do the following. In my opinion, the CDC failed to do the following: immediate testing for urinary thiodiglolic acid, even before EPA determined what the substances of concern were. It's common sense that exposure to vinyl chloride and its highly toxic oxidation products, chloroethylene oxide and chloroacetylene, needed to be evaluated. They should have initiated testing as soon as possible, and understanding that the kinetics of vinyl chloride metabolism and urinary thioglycolic acid are complex and modulated by many factors, should have designed a periodic testing regimen to best characterize the risk and how exposure was changing or not changing over time. Keep going. I asked the CDC recommendation, which is probably based upon the assumption that the vinyl chloride exposure was limited to directly after the derailment and burn, is short-sighted and wrong, I asked. The chemist responded, absolutely yes. It is unsupported by principles of environmental transport and fate, unsupported by residents' ongoing symptoms, unsupported by clinical thioglycolic acid tests, and demonstrates a reluctance to inform their decision-making with science and sound risk management. Does this sound familiar, Melissa?
Yeah, it's word for word. One, they were trying to, at first, lead wasn't the issue. It was total trimethanes, which are carcinogens. And they tried to say, well, you got to be swimming in it for 60 years before it'll hurt you. Oh, wait, that was data from the 80s. My bad. We don't know. Then it was bacteria killing people. And they're like, oh, well, it's just a little E. coli. You'll bounce back. It'll be fine. Then when we finally got them to admit that there was lead in the water, oh, well, it takes a lot of lead to be ingested. And if you're over the age of 6 and under the age of 65, you're fine. All of these are false. And they have still to this day, they've yet to do tissue testing, toenail testing, which, by the way, toenails hold 18 months of not only what you were exposed to, but body load, meaning what your body holds on to. So keep that in mind. Hair and all that, all of these samples to do, because also no one can answer for us, and you guys will need these types of questions, is the combo and the longevity. What happens to our body if we are exposed to heavy metals, carcinogens, and bacteria for 9 years? What happens when we're not just drinking it and cooking with it, but bathing in it? We have no bathing and showering standards in this country. And also pretty much none of the standards they're talking about are health-based at all. Like the levels they talk about for, heavy metals and the different things that you're being exposed to, you should have any of that in your body. The thioglycolic acid, none of that. You should not have that because you should not be exposed to vinyl chloride. It's not a vitamin, for God's sake. You should not be exposed to these dioxins. These are not things your body can process. These are things that do damage as they come in and go out. So the fact that they're like, oh, well, whatever, we don't have any research on it. Yeah, well, guaranteed that they do somewhere, but you're not going to see it because it's not going to be good. And that's why they don't want to do the test. That's why they don't have evidence of any health impact because they're refusing to do the test. It's the same thing like them saying, oh, there's no bacteria in your water, Flint, because we're not testing for it. And that's why they're also saying, oh, it's only at this level, like basically the explosion and everything, the wind doesn't move, the water doesn't move, people don't move, soil doesn't move, it stays exactly where it fell, right there, because and it didn't go beyond the little circle, the little half-mile circle they initially said, because they didn't test outside of it. And it's what they've been doing, especially when they tested for your parks. They go Easter egg hunting, we're going to test in these 7 spots, and we're only going to test a little bit and for a few things. But, as long as you're in these 7 little circles in this park, you'll be fine. Good luck hunting your eggs. So that it's what they say, but also what they don't say. And when they start off by saying everything is within federal regulatory limits, you know that they're lying because that has nothing to do with your health because they're not health-based standards. And, you can go. But the first night I rolled into town to come see what I could do to help down there, my nose bled. And that happens when they dump a bunch of chemicals in our water in Flint when they're doing the chlorine burnout, which is a whole different situation. So yeah, my nose is like, no way, and so for them to say, oh, well, that's fine. No, it's not fine. It's not okay. We're on video getting dumb, even with respirators on, it's not okay.
And she's talking about by the creek that they allowed children to play by. They allowed children to play by this creek. They allowed children to play by this creek for a month. It took a month. And the EPA administrator, the federal EPA, he was asked by, I guess a reporter decided to do their job for 30 seconds in East Palestine, was asked, should kids be playing by this? 30 days later, he says, yeah, if it was my children, I'd probably tell them not to play. Well, they were fucking poisoned within those 30 days. And by the way, there were adults jogging by that contaminated creek. You've seen the video if you guys are watching.
Baby. She was pushing a baby up alongside that creek while they was aerating it. And then we all bitched about the signs. Put signs up, put caution tape. Guess what they did? They put up brown signs saying testing. Nothing about danger, nothing about anything. They put up testing. Well, we all know you're testing this shit.
Well, they should be testing. They're not, but I mean, they're doing something, I guess. But I mean, so it's basically the same thing. As long as we allow corporations to run everything, and especially when we allow the guilty party, it's like if you stabbed me and you're like, well, I stabbed her, she's fine. Take my advice. Don't ask her, but also not take her to the hospital or anything like that. But just take my word for it. I stabbed her and she's fine. It's a little stabbing. I mean, she's dead, but she's fine. You do not allow the perpetrators to be in control of the recovery. And that is what is exactly happening. Your state, your mayor, all these people are allowing the money to be in control. Well, the money is what poisoned you. And that's why the only test results y'all are going to see are what helps the money. And that's what's happened here in Flint. You know, that's why nobody's sitting in jail like they should be. If I poison one person, my ass to be in jail. But 100,000 people, oh well, you know, my bad, because they're black and brown and poor people, or they're undereducated, or we don't see them as important. They're disposable people. And now it's happening to you guys. Norfolk's like, well, we don't really need these folks around, and they're kind of loud and annoying, so dust off as long as our people are okay. And I don't know how the CDC can say anything's okay since half their testing team got sick while in, East Palestine.
Yes.
How?
And I'll say, I don't really give a shit what people are, because we got liberals in the audience, progressives, conservatives, libertarians, people who aren't anything. At the end of the day, the contaminants don't give a shit what your political ideology are.
Exactly.
They're poisoning conservative areas, liberal areas, hippie areas. It doesn't matter. So people need to, start getting out and protesting in front of the White House, in front of your governor's mansions, in front of your mayor's mansions. Stop fighting with each other. And it's tough because Flint's 9 years later. People are tired physically and mentally. There's a lot of people who have died. It's tough to get out there and keep that momentum and keep that energy to keep fighting when you've been beaten down. And I don't need this. Melissa can tell you, but Joe Biden isn't doing anything. And Governor DeWine isn't doing anything other than, weekly updates. We've moved this much soil and everything's fine. And the children had to play at the school and everything's fine. And, nothing to see here. Biden hasn't even gone to East Palestine.
This is malice. They should be criminal charges on DeWine, the EPA, the mayor. I mean, this is criminal, and nobody's looking at it as criminal. Nobody.
It's absolutely criminal.
If nothing is done, Eric, I got news for you. If nothing is done, you're going to be where Melissa and Flint is in 9 years, because not one government official has been even seen a trial, let alone been convicted for poisoning a city of 100,000. So
there's a few of us trying. That's what we're doing.
I've talked to a few of the other ladies down there and everything. I'm happy to connect with you. If you want to do some joint actions, I'm for it. And we need to go where the decisions are being made. Not let it to where it stays within our town. Because one, you shouldn't be. I mean, I heard your story. Expletive, swear word, upset me. And you're trapped. And
this is Status Coup. You could fuck and fuck all day long. Go ahead.
You piss me off because you're sitting there. You don't want to lose your foster kids, and you're fucking trapped being poisoned. Fuck East Palestine and Flint and Michigan and the state of Ohio and every other damn state that's going in like this. So pardon my language. I feel better now. But if you want to do some joint stuff, I have some ideas. I have some very creative ideas, but it's just going to take some work. But we need to hit the people where it hurts and not be protesting up and down in Flint, because everybody in Flint knows it's fucked up. Everybody in East Palestine knows it's sick, and you don't need to get worse. But let's go and knock on the doors and the personal addresses of these governors, because that helped us out, when we were getting attention before all of the criminal cases were thrown in the trash by our current Attorney General Nessel, who is great. But let's do some stuff. And with all the folks watching and everything, they can help, they can elevate it, and we can get some, and let's just be as brutal as possible, but without wrecking our stuff and not being thugs, because that's what they're going to want. They're going to be like, well, be like Ferguson and everything, so we can have these people come in from the outside and burn your city down. No, our cities have taken enough. But you know what? Those people sitting in their mansions could probably use some visits from some folks like us.
Oh, they're bringing Jeep rodeos in here. They're bringing, actually people doing. I had one guy tell me, there was a woman that flew in from Alaska. I said, don't bite the hand that feeds you. How long do you think she's going to have time? She's going to come and buy your shit for, in this town. This is the stuff. And it's mostly, I'm not saying all, I'm saying there's some business owners that's promoting bringing people into this town, knowing that people are testing positive.
So I got told I put a black eye on Flint by bringing all this out, and that I was bad for business because they wanted tourists to come in. I'm like, why are you poisoning the tourists? And what is this, like poverty porn? Do you want to go take pictures with all the sick people waiting in line for bottled water? And that it was exactly it. We had people trying to start Instagram modeling careers, taking pictures of poor little kids waiting in line for bottled water. My God, be like, okay, well, you're looking at this. What are you going to do about it? How about you come to our town? If you want to help people donate to the impacted communities, and I don't know, the journalists that actually uplift the impacted communities. And how about instead of causing more problems or getting sick yourself, and then we get to hear this woe is me story down the line, how about you do something that can help by elevating the voices and the work of the actual
because they're being paid off just like the people in your town that gave you shit getting paid off.
And I'm like, good, go to bed on your sleep, go to sleep with your pile of money in your bed and whatever, and your no soul. But we're going to sit here and fight back. And that's great, and that's great. This is not just venting. This is for real letting people know. I saw somebody said this is just venting. And sure, we sound mad, but why wouldn't you be if somebody poisoned your whole town and your city and they're just walking away like they're heroes and they're fine?
Well, the bottom line is, I could tell you as a journalist, everybody watching, I know it's tough because human nature, we don't really get in that mindset until it directly affects us. There are good humans who care if it doesn't directly affect them. But you have to treat what's with East Palestine, Flint, Indiana now. I mean, literally every other hour I'm seeing another train derailment or plant on fire or something blowing up and contaminated. We haven't even gotten to fracking and mining and all that stuff. You got to treat it like it's happening in your community because you can be next. And if we're playing the game of percentages, you might be next. The people in East Palestine did not think, the train was going to blow up 2 months ago. I can promise you the people of Flint didn't even know their water was being changed 9 years ago, or that it would be poisoned. People in Indiana were probably not even told that this plastics plant had more code violations than known to man, and they didn't know. I mean, think about right now, all of the mischievous, deviant things that are going on just in corporate pollution, corporate contamination, corporate recklessness, governmental recklessness. They're basically the same thing because the corporations and the government are working together. So your community, whether it's a small town, a big city, whatever, you can have a big environmental calamity. And this is the playbook. They do the testing. A lot of the time, it's either directly manipulated or cherry picked. A lot of the time, as the EPA official will tell you, they're using equipment that doesn't even detect certain levels. A lot of the time, frankly, you'd be surprised how many idiots work at the EPA, the CDC, and various agencies. Because there's a reason that independent testers who are not on the payroll almost always are getting higher contamination levels with far less resources, by the way, to do the testing. So, Eric, before I let you go, because I want to get into Indiana with Melissa, just tell the audience, I mean, you said this is one of the few times you're scared. I'm fingers crossed that you're not going to have any long-term problems, but how are you going to afford continued testing? Because you're saying this is almost $1,000 to get the testing.
To be honest, sir, I have not a clue. I don't know. I don't know what tomorrow brings, let alone what an hour brings from now. Everything changes in this whole situation daily, hourly. I don't know what we're going to do next. I know that I have to get my fiance out of here, but we have no means. We bought this house 6 months ago. 6 months ago. And I can't go pay another mortgage. Right now, we're financially ruined right now. Financially ruined. I've took every dollar. I haven't took, I was asked a couple questions about taking money from the, NS. I've supported everything that they've gave me, came out of my pocket. I turned in my receipts. The $1,000, I did get $1,000, but you know what? We the people evacuated ourselves. We gave a $1 billion company an interest-free loan to evacuate ourselves. They owed me that in fucking interest. That's the way I look at it. And if anybody don't like it, they more or less they kiss my ass. I'll say it out there. They can kiss my ass. Plain and simple.
Well, if you want to make a GoFundMe, we already have audience willing to contribute. So if you make one, we'll put it under the video, and hopefully if people have a couple bucks, they could chip in. And that's the country we're living in, where poisoned people have to basically depend on.
Yeah, rely on other people.
Right.
But I'm
and by the
willing,
way,
and I want to put this out there before I leave. I want to put this out there. I will help anybody, and I don't care what state it's in. We'll all stand together. We'll all bond. We'll all go to the White House. I don't give a damn because I'm already financially ruined. I'll take every dollar I have. As long as my fiance and my kids get out of here, I'll take every dollar I have, and I'll fight the fight. That I'll promise.
I got you, bud. We'll road trip this.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Eric. Let's stay in touch. I appreciate you telling me.
I appreciate you too.
So don't go anywhere, because we have another toxic cesspool that I think the EPA is lying about. But before we move on to Indiana, by the way, according to the EPA, a plastics plant with no sprinklers, no known fire hazard, had mice and other things rolling around it, had many different types of plastic stacked to the ceiling, exploded less than a week ago. They found hydrogen cyanide, which can be fatal if you breathe it. They found benzene and other things within the half-mile evacuation zone. According to them, the tests, they found it within the half-mile, but 0.51 miles, everything was fine. They've already ended the evacuation, and the residents can come home. Well, I spoke with residents who burning eyes, headaches, same shit, but the evacuation has been lifted. I'd love to see this testing that they're basing it on. But before I move to that, Melissa, closing thoughts on test for vinyl chloride from the start. Why are they not testing now? Why didn't they test for vinyl chloride from the start? Why are they not testing now? Why isn't there federal or state financial assistance to pay for it? I mean, this is, in my view, criminal, because how many kids or adults have carcinogens in their system right now that they don't know about?
So my gut tells me that they didn't test for vinyl chloride or any of the metabolites of vinyl chloride doing damage in your system, because basically you're not walking around normally being exposed to vinyl chloride, right? So they could actually do, the one thing they'll want to look for is causation and correlation. Is the vinyl chloride in your system from Norfolk Southern wrecking and then the explosions? And if there's no other sources, and you saw that early on when I went to East Palestine, you saw the flyers they were handing out saying you could also get VOCs from candles and air fresheners. Well, not vinyl chloride. So basically, they're talking about bad odors, not vinyl chloride. So there's no other way that vinyl chloride would have possibly gotten in these people's system except for the train derailing full of vinyl chloride and then the burning of vinyl chloride. So I think that's absolutely why they're not testing for vinyl chloride now and then, because also it in no way, shape, or form only happened per the wreck and then explosion, and then it all fell down in a perfect circle and then stayed that way. Same with Indiana. It did not just stay there and not get disrupted. So people are like Eric, are being continually exposed. So if they start testing for it when people still have some kind of the metabolites in their system, then it's going to show up that they're culpable and they'll have to pay. And so that's why they're not testing for it. It's like you can't find what you're not testing for. You can't be blamed for something that you're not testing for, that you haven't found. And that's why. And that's, I mean, if there were other contaminants that are possibly in the environment or that other people could be exposed to in other ways, like the cobalt, like on the video he's talking about the cobalt, the gentleman who worked at a nuclear power plant being exposed to having cobalt in his system. Well, he could have possibly gotten it from his job. Well, there's nothing, no other vinyl chloride exposure that these folks would have had in their day-to-day except for, the derailment and the explosion. And that would then be causation and correlation to the health problems, which means not only do they owe people compensation for what's happened right now, but their entire life, the damages. And in no way, shape, or form is some kind of corporation or this government corporation we have going to want to openly, honestly, and upfront pay without some kind of legal battle and pulling all kind of teeth. So they're just going to turn a blind eye. And then maybe what they'll do is once they get the gist that maybe it's out of the people's system and the damage is done, they'll be like, oh yeah, we tested and everything's fine. but you guys were worried about nothing all along, told you it wasn't so bad. That's what they did with Legionnaires here. They tested after it was possibly in people's bodies, and they're like, see, told you that bacterial pneumonia you had wasn't Legionnaires. You're fine, although it was well past the window that it was in their body.
Read my Substack piece on this very story that includes the video clips, so you could share them around. I wrote a Substack piece. Colin put it in the super chat. It's at the top. It's the pinned comment at the top of the super chat. It's also in the description under the live stream. Please read it, share it. You could sign up for Substack for free to Status Coup Substack, and share the clips with the recording so we could show that the doctors are clearly saying the CDC is telling us not to test for this. So please, please, please read it, share it, subscribe to Substack. Last thing I'll say, well, Melissa, if they tested the whole town from the beginning, and let's say half the town, 60%, 70% had elevated levels of vinyl chloride, then the question becomes, well, maybe we need to test further than East Palestine, because that plume, common sense, did not stop in the city limits or... I mean, by some accounts, that plume went 100 miles, maybe further. So if they test all of East Palestine and you get a significant amount of residents with high levels of East Palestine, don't you think residents elsewhere would say, well, I have symptoms, and then the bill goes way the fuck up. So it's all the same, profits before people.
100%. And that's when things like water, air, soil, our bodies are treated as commodity, people die. And that's what's happening. It's profit over people. Like, well, we don't want to pay for the cleanup, so they're not doing it properly. I mean, they're just dumping it up the road. And we also don't want to pay for the medical care. We have been fighting and demanding, a form of Medicare for all for Flint residents. So, we don't want to pay for your health care for the diseases that you've developed from the poisoning that we still say didn't exist or wasn't so bad. So it's funny. They're like, no, we're not going to pay for your treatment for the poisoning that we also said didn't happen. But also it happened, but we're not going to pay for it. Deal with it. And that's what East Palestine is looking at now. And it's even worse because at least we were able to go after our state government, in the court. They're after a private company. It's so much more of a mess to try to get any kind of money from a private corporation. They can just like GM did when they, contaminated Flint. They could just go ahead and file bankruptcy and then, sell us to another company, start another company name. It's difficult. Either way, it's difficult. The government's failing East Palestine too. I mean, seriously, the federal government, state government, it's god awful. But it's the same thing as they're doing here. But then they also have this $1 billion, corporation that's pulling all the strings, and they don't want to pay more than, what would, impact their stock prices a penny or whatever. They don't want to, have their investors lose money. So why would they want to pay for healthcare and testing for these people in this town and the surrounding states? So no. If they didn't test for it, they can't be blamed for it, and then they don't have to pay for it, right? It's all that whole explosion, everything was all just them blowing it out of proportion, and it didn't happen. It's a mushroom cloud was just, they just blew it out of proportion because they just want something. I'm waiting for that to come out as the next thing, because that was with us. They're like, oh no, you put the lead in your water. I'm like, what? And you just want something for free. I was like, yeah, not to die in my house, but that's cool. And I just want health care for the poisoning that you did, and I want you to fix my house that you broke, and my plumbing. But no, it's you being greedy. I'm like, well, and then somebody brought up the $600 million settlement that's still ongoing because the state and everybody still hasn't paid a dime. I haven't got my $12, that'll be nothing, but still here we are. You try to fight for justice so it doesn't happen to other people, and then you turn around and they're like, well, maybe we won't poison their water with, disinfection byproducts, bacteria, and then, corrode the pipes. But maybe we'll just wreck this train and then tell everybody, because when we went down there, we were bringing up the water, and they're like, no, it's not going to be in the water. I'm like, y'all have wells, that's in the soil, that's in the dirt. You have pipes in the dirt. What do you think happens? And then what was it, like a week after we left? Then all of a sudden they're like, it's in our wells. And I'm like, duh. Yeah, great. And I'm not like a PhD or anything, so it's just, Jenna, I just sprinkled. I'm like the lead fairy. I sprinkled, 1,700 parts per billion of lead in my water. That's cool. But that's like East Palestine. And then they're going to blame it on them. They're like, you trucked it in or you brought it in. And then they just are going to blame the victims, and the victims are going to be left to suffer. And some people are going to give up. Some are going to, pass away, unfortunately, and some are going to move on. So we just have to really uplift and support those strong voices that are, that are standing strong and pushing back and not giving anything like Eric. Like there's so many people that are they've turned from regular folk just trying to survive in, this world that we have anyway, into heroes, and they're doing amazing work down there. So we just have to uplift them and support them so they can continue to fight back and let them know that they're not alone, and that we do care.
I want to get to Indiana quickly, and then an update from Flint before I go tend to my crying baby upstairs. Indiana, less than a week ago, this was Tuesday, massive inferno from a plastics recycling plant. Apparently, the plastics recycling plant had a deadbeat owner, wasn't paying property taxes. They had plastics stacked to the sky, to the ceiling. There were reports that there were rats and other things. No fire sprinkler system. There were lawsuits between the city and the company. It was declared that it was a fire hazard. Somehow the state could not the city did take over 2/3 of the plant, yet these things weren't fixed for some reason. And what came out of that in Richmond, Indiana, and it also went over the border of Ohio. So Ohio's getting it from both sides, East Palestine to the east, and this went into Ohio in the Dayton area as well on the west of Ohio. You had, Colin, if we could read this from NBC, Indiana plastics fire spewed toxic chemicals, EPA test finds, including benzene and hydrogen cyanide. Hydrogen cyanide gas can be fatal depending on the dose and length of exposure. Benzene can cause various types of cancer among those with long-term exposure. As Aaron Brockovich said, there could have been hundreds of chemicals in that plume because there were a variety of different types of plastics that were flammable and lit on fire. So on one end, you have the EPA acknowledging that they found things that are toxic, could be fatal, yet they're saying they only found it in the half-mile evacuation zone. I don't know. I'm not a chemist, but that plume to the naked eye looked like it traveled, and there's something called wind and weather. How is it that you found it in the half-mile evacuation zone, but further out, no problem? And they already lifted this less than a week later. So the people that were evacuated, they're telling it's safe to come home. By the way, in debris, they have found asbestos in some samples. And the EPA told residents, do not touch any debris that you're finding in your yard, because at least one sample tested for asbestos. Asked the people of Libby, Montana about asbestos, which killed hundreds there. They got Medicare for all, by the way, after that. But am I in the twilight zone? First of all, they're saying that they're not finding these levels outside of the half-mile range. How is that possible? Is there just like a virtual wall where it just dissipates at the 0.49 mile mark, and this hydrogen cyanide and benzene and all the other shit that's in that plume doesn't go further? Colin, I don't know if you have any of the images left, if you want to just show them. I mean, this was massive. This fire, even after they put it out, it was still technically, you were having sparks and this and that for days. This went on for 5-6 days. I think it sucks to have to evacuate. A lot of people don't have anywhere to go because in these situations, the government doesn't really have a thorough program to send you anywhere other than shelters. But wouldn't you want to exercise all the caution in the world before telling people they could come home? I've spoken with 3 residents. They've all told me similar symptoms: real bad headaches, burning eyes, sinus kind of stuff. I don't know what they're declaring it safe on to lift the evacuation.
Just look at that. It's not going straight up and stopping against an invisible wall. I also used to live in Indiana, and let me say they have wind. Wind exists there. I know it's shocking, but yeah, that looks like it's covering more than a half a mile. Were they only test a half mile in the opposite direction, maybe? Like, or a half mile, like nowhere near the burn site. Like, did they specify where the half mile was? That was fine. just out of curiosity, I'd like to see the same thing with the parks in East Palestine. I'd like to actually see the test results and what they're saying. Did they not test past 0.49? Because I did not see that invisible wall, stopping that cloud of death from moving. I mean, maybe I missed it. Maybe something's wrong with my vision. That cloud moved. Also, like, they tell you all the time, you cannot burn plastics. Like, you can't, we were dealing with all the plastic bottles because we're still drinking a bottle of water. You can't burn them. Don't burn them. Don't burn your trash. Don't burn this because it's toxic. Okay, that's a bottle of water. That's a couple of bottles. Yeah, and hydrogen cyanide is, potentially fatal. Asbestos. And also, so they don't even know what all kind of plastics were in there. They don't know what all kind burns. Then also, they're not talking about the combos that happen when you have multiple contaminants that are on fire. And then apparently they didn't pay attention to the fact that we all in this general area had 80-degree weather for like a week, and now we had like snow and wind. All that blew in because wind moved, soil moved. This contaminant will get in the water, and it will be in the soil, in the water. My God, it is exactly East Palestine. It is exactly the same thing. Oh, look, it's a nuke cloud. Wow. Somebody really wants the land in Ohio and Indiana, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Illinois. They just want all this like farmland to use for what? I don't know. I mean, it's not going to be usable because you're not going to be able to grow anything there. But anyhow, I would really like to see what their testing looks like and where they tested and what they tested for. Unless it's one of those situations where they're like, we didn't bother to test at 0.51 at all. So we can be like, hey, it didn't go past the half-mile thing because we just didn't test past the half-mile mark. My God.
It's dumbfounding to me. And by the way, if this was in a wealthy area, do you think wealthy wine moms would be like, oh, okay, the EPA says it's safe, we'll come back? Fuck no. And I'm not saying they're smarter, but they would demand a lot more. They would say, you're putting me and my kids and my wine cave up at a hotel because they have money and power. And I don't think they would rush a wealthier class back to their homes. I don't think this would happen in a super wealthy area.
But unfortunately, the wealthy area could afford to pick up and go move. They can go buy another house, so they can do this and that. It's the same reason when people ask Flint residents why we don't move. Well, one, look, the water's going bad everywhere, so where will we move? But two, most regular folk we live paycheck to paycheck, and we have enough in our savings to maybe handle an emergency, maybe. But most folks don't have enough to pick up and buy another house elsewhere and move their kids and their family and all their things all at once. Or like they told people to get up, leave all your stuff because it's contaminated, and then just go buy all new furniture, all new things, all new everything. I mean, because, we obviously don't take care of our people in this country, their health. We don't pay people what what they should be getting paid and all that. So yeah, most people can't just pick up and relocate. And where? Like also with that cloud, where did it stop? Where did it stop sprinkling down death? Because then we have to try to map out where we can move that's not more toxic than where we're living right now.
It's just, honestly, it's just crazy to me. Absolutely crazy town. And, listen, obviously people want to go home. Most people, you still have to work. I mean, I would hope your job is, accommodating, but a lot aren't. A lot are working multiple jobs. These areas are the deindustrialized Midwest. A lot of people are struggling. But at the end of the day, even if the inferno is not blazing now, I mean, that stuff is in the air. It takes a little while before it gets to the ground level. And you don't know the combination of the different types of plastics. I don't even think the EPA knows what all the contaminants that were possible. You need to exercise an abundance of caution, and they're not. And there's another secondary issue where I don't want to be dramatic. You think this is the only plant in America that has code violations up the wazoo that the residents who live next to it don't know? You think this is the only plant or mine or whatever that have kind of slumlord owners? You think it's the only one that is violating health codes that don't have a fire sprinkler or a fire hazard? How many of them have smaller explosions that don't make the news but could contaminate? So we basically have an EPA that is either incompetent or intentionally looking the other way and just exercising their playbook. You have a CDC that I think is the Capitalism Defense Center. I mean, it was horrible. In my view, their reaction to COVID. It was very clear when the conference call was for them to all just shut it down and say, everything's fine now, back to normal. If you're hacking your lungs out, go back to work. Don't wear a mask. You're fine. But I just feel for the people in Indiana because headache, well, and one hand doesn't know what the other. So if you are having symptoms there, well, if the evacuation zone was lifted, all right. If you live in Richmond, you're going to call the county health department. They're going to tell you, well, you got to call this department. You know the runaround because you've dealt with more bureaucracy and more ping pong calling this number where they say, well, we're not dealing with that. You have to call this number. You call that number. They tell you you have to call the number that just told you to call them. And before you know it, you're on the phone for 3 hours.
With no results, no answers, and you just got to try to figure out how to pay for it out of pocket. I mean, I even have that run around with trying to get proper samples with, the stuff we picked up from East Palestine, and then trying to get myself tested, trying to get my family tested from the water. Every time, like as time goes on, you're going to find out, usually after it's too late. Like we didn't find out about PFAS in our water being 7 times the highest in the state, on top of all the other fracking waste and all the other, contaminants that Flint has ingested. And they're like, oh yeah, here's another one, by the way. And we're like, oh, okay, my God. And that's happening in East Palestine. Like you just helped uncover that additional, contaminant. So it's going to be a slow leak of information, usually after it's too late to get tested. And it'll just sprinkle it out and be like, oops, or somebody will have come across it by accident. And, the heavy metals and everything like that. I'm following the money is exactly right. Who stands to benefit by it being silent? And it's whoever's funding your government officials and whoever's owned the property and whoever's looking to buy it. All of them are involved, and the human beings are just in the way of profit. So shame on us for existing and wanting to not be murdered so they can make more money. My bad. I apologize. I don't. But, it's just that over and over again. And people need to realize, we get tired. It's just like the kids getting murdered by guns. We're all getting numb to hearing about this. And, like our congressman said that other people in the legislature were saying that they had Flint fatigue. They're tired of hearing about Flint when we're trying to get resources. And you should try living here. But that's dangerous because the more we grow numb to other people's traumas and environmental disasters, the more it's going to, it's going to wear on us. This is normal. This is the new normal. This is the new normal, to live with toxic black nuking plumes and bad water and having to use tap filters that may or may not work and drink bottled water that may or may not be tested by the FDA, and this is not okay. This is not okay. But also, warning, this could very well happen to you. Again, all the laws that aren't protecting the folks in East Palestine and Richmond, Indiana, and Flint, Michigan, Jackson, Mississippi, all the laws that are failing us are also failing you. And in some instances, we have cities in Michigan that didn't think they could have poison water. I'm like, it's the same state EPA, the state environment. It's the same people. Why would they? I mean, yes, it's going to be easier to poison the poor folk or the people living paycheck to paycheck and everything. But guess what? It doesn't stop at us. It moves its way up. And also, you're in that same breathing area. You still drink the water. We're all connected. So people need to know it very well can happen to you. So we just want people to wake up. First of all, get to know the laws. It's horrible. It's horrifying. It's a terrible read. And, it's stuff that I didn't know about beforehand. And I really wish was not stored up in my head. There's funnier, better things that could be going, like video games and music. But here we are. But also help other people stand up so that way you'll know how to stand up if and when it happens to you, which of course we hope it doesn't. We hope we can actually make a change in DC and actually get non-corporate funded people, who are actually humans with, heart, souls, and conscience and all that stuff to help make the laws. We all have to fight for that. We can't just give up, throw our hands up because then they win, right? But we have to stand together to make sure that this stops for the people who are currently getting poisoned, that they get justice, that they get reparations that they deserve, but then also the rest of everybody who hasn't been poisoned yet, it doesn't happen to you. So that's what's important here. And also we have to change these laws. There have to be health-based standards put into place. And also, in no way, shape, or form should somebody look at a black nuke cloud and be like, in a week, yeah, you're good, it's fine. Because we said so. Oh yeah, we're the ones that were monitoring it, but allowed it to happen. But we say it's fine. So.
And lastly, in a case study of do not automatically trust what the government says. I'm not saying the government lies about every single thing, but today is the 9-year anniversary, April 17th, 2014. For you Flint residents know about this, that a worker at the water plant,
Supervisor
Mike Glasgow, sent an email to this Michigan State Environmental Department saying it will be against my direction. It will be against my direction if we switch to the Flint River next week. We're not ready. We're understaffed. And basically, it's not safe. He never got a response. And we know what happened the following week, April 25th. So in a week or so, will be the 9-year anniversary. Because we have a really, speaking of toxic media in this country, that if you're lucky, they'll cover a mass shooting for longer than 5 hours at this point. Usually if like 20 kids got killed, they'll cover it for maybe a week and then move on. But if it's just your run of the mill, like, 4 or 5 people dead, it's now just, we'll do it for an hour or two, maybe a day. That's it. They can't cover anything unless it's the political horse race, who's up, who's down, artificial, substanceless bullshit and sensationalism, perp walk. Meanwhile, you have chemical plume after chemical plume after chemical plume, poison, residents being poisoned, poor black people, poor white people, Native Americans. But Flint, we're talking 9 years later. Honestly, for me, there's been 2 jobs. One is finding out the information and breaking stories on the cover up. And the other job, which is actually proven to be harder, is getting people to give a shit. Because every year that goes by, people give less and less of a shit. Not as much the American people, but the media. The struggle I have had to get media to pick up stories when I have thousands of confidential documents from the criminal investigation. I can't get major media to publish a story on the Flint cover-up. It's, because I've shown you, Herculean to get them to care. I'm trying to get a book publisher. I got an offer from a small publisher. Haven't gotten any of the big publishers to sign on to a book about a massive government cover-up on the poisoning of 100,000 people. But I wanted to just ask you, for people that might be watching, might be new to the channel, have heard what the EPA said. They think, the EPA said years ago, the water in Flint is back to normal, that the crisis is over. How's your water right now this week?
So this week it currently smells like fish, like a stagnant pond, because we're in the middle of what you call chlorine burnout, which is to pass a test for total trialomethane disinfection byproducts, because when chlorine interacts with, and does its job, interacts with organic compounds in the lines, it lets off a gas. That's the bleach smell we all smell. That's not chlorine by itself. That's chlorine interacting and doing its job. Like in a swimming pool, it's, hitting the pee and the sweat and all that stuff like it's supposed to, and disinfecting. It releases a gas. Enough of that gas, that's that bleach smell, enough of that can cause cancer. It's a carcinogen, right? So one of the Safe Drinking Water Act tests is to pass that you don't have high levels of this in the drinking water. Well, in order to cheat the test, water systems will use either chloramines, which is ammonia and chlorine, which is not great, or will just turn off the chlorine in the weeks before the test to make sure there's no chlorine there to interact with anything. So then there's no, carcinogenic gas released to fail the test, because they don't want to be in trouble again, right? They don't want to let people know the water's not okay. Then what happens after they pass the test? Then you've got bacteria and all kind of gross things running wild in the pipe. They do chlorine burnout, so they overdose the chlorine, and that gives bloody noses, burnt eyes, gastro problems, headaches, dizziness, people passing out, breathing problems. Here we go. So we were just getting chemical bombs, so that way they can try to play catch up with the bacteria that's been allowed to grow in our system while not having chlorine. So now we got pond, so that triggers, well, guess what? Must be time for another TPHM test for the city so they can lie. People's lead levels have been going up. We were back in court about them still replacing the pipes. They're going to miss that. So no, our water is not better. We still have rashes and headaches. And
let me just pause you for a second. Because she said it kind of quick. 9 years later, all of the busted pipes have not been replaced. 9 years later, all of the busted pipes that the water goes through to your home, that the toxic Flint River water, busted, meaning contaminated, corroded, they have not been changed. Correct.
Yep. No, yeah. Super Bowl weekend, we didn't have water because Maine broke. And at that same time, I also had to go pay $529 for a shutoff notice. So I had to pay a shutoff notice to keep my non-running water that's toxic on. So they're doing a mass shutoff, saying they need money so that anybody that was 60 days behind or what they think was behind, and they make assumptions if you're going to pay or not, then they make you pay. We pay the highest rate in the United States for water that we still cannot consume safely without filtering and then boiling. So that's fun, a fun exercise, or buy bottled water, which is not fun. Nobody wants to do that here. So anyhow, no, the water's not safe. And they keep saying that Flint's water meets federal regulations. Once again, that 15 parts per billion is not the safe level. It means if 90% of your tests in the city test over 15 parts per billion, you have a corrosion control problem and you have to actually do something. That's why it's called an action level. The safe level of lead is 0. So no, people don't have safe water. And then of course that's lead, and they're not talking about bacteria or those disinfection byproducts that people are testing high for during the year in between those tests. So yeah, no, we still have, even if you had the Lord's most perfect clean spring water, it's still being served up to us through corroded mains that are rupturing into the streets, losing all of our good, treatment chemicals, and then being filled with all the disgusting stuff that's been dumped in the soil and in the roads and all that stuff. The distribution mains in the streets, the service lines and under the yards, and the interior plumbing, appliances, and fixtures are still broken. The whole you break it, you buy it, you fix it thing is not happening. And the only way we've been able to even get some of the service lines replaced is through going to court. And we filed the intent to sue in October of 2015, and we settled in 2017, and they were supposed to have everything done by 2020, and that was just for service lines. And we just had to take them back to court in February, again, for not doing it because the city and state are hand in hand with letting them rot. And we have no one to go to with that because all of the criminal cases were tossed in the trash. And it's the fox and the hen house, but they're actually buddies. So it's just whatever's going on, that disgusting orgy of unaccountable wealthy folks just poisoning people. But they're doing it to other cities. So more people are standing up saying, hey, like Benton Harbor and Detroit and everything are saying, hey, there's a problem here. Of course there is. So once again, we're fighting to be fixed properly. We are fighting. I have my moments being strong. Sometimes I'm yelling and cussing. You missed earlier, maybe. I'll swear. And usually I try to hold it in. It's been a long Monday or Tuesday, whatever day it is. It's bad. So anyhow, people are still getting sick. We're still having, I am so sorry. Mud paws. I'm so sorry. We've lost way too many good people because of this water and from cancers. And we have a huge cancer cluster going right now. And
what are you talking about? The state says only 12 people died.
Right. Only 12 people. Sometimes it's 14. Except for the hundreds of death certificates they found of people that died during that same time period from bacterial pneumonia, which was missed or undiagnosed Legionnaires, meaning they did not test the people with bacterial pneumonia, which is what Legionnaire's disease is, for Legionnaire's disease, because then if they didn't say that there was a problem in people's bodies, they didn't have to test the water for it, which they did not. So it's the same thing across the board.
And I think what you mentioned is really important because the media doesn't report this, but because there was no health registry, which there should have been from day one to track people's illnesses. But I mean, just anecdotally, when I was knocking on doors years ago, I can't tell you how many people told me, yeah, this person just died. This person just died. Oh, this person just died. Flint is now a cancer cluster with people 30s, 40s, 50s, rare types of cancers that they don't have a family history of, relatively healthy people before the water was switched. So those cancers are not being added to the official Flint water death count, even though, why do you think Flint is a cancer cluster? You think it's the weather? Why do you think Flint?
They blame it on us that we don't know how to eat and that we're super unhealthy and we just eat at the gas station. So that's what's happening in East Palestine and in Indiana and all these exploded places. They're going to try to avoid any kind of causation and correlation. We have tried repeatedly to get hair, blood, tissue, toenail testing done in conjunction with water testing to try to prove what's going on, and we've been denied repeatedly. And so, they do not want that causation and correlation because that means somebody who's in charge will have to pay for the bad things that they did. And Lord knows that can't happen. We don't want the wealthy to cut a check or sit their rear ends in jail like they would if they were me. If I did it. But so we do. We have weird diseases. When COVID hit in 2020, we had a 12.5% case fatality rate. because we have no immune systems, and that was the highest in the world, by the way, highest in the world. So in response to this, the health department stepped up and then just changed the way they reported the numbers and started to break it down by zip code and stuff. So, that's how they fix these problems. And that's what's going to happen in these other cities too. So as long as we keep talking about it, then they're going to be aware that, hey, this has happened and this is what you're going to do next. So we can try to disrupt that playbook. And so maybe more people can survive this and, and do what they can to move forward to help others. Mustard gas is correct, by the way. So people are breathing that. They're like, oh, no, it's fine. It's fine. No, it's fine. Y'all are fine. So basically, we just have to keep trying to tell the truth, and we, keep appreciating you more than anything because you keep, screaming out there as well and allowing me to scream on your screen. And for everybody who said nice things over here, I saw it, and I absolutely love you guys. You guys are amazing. And thank you for caring about us and everything. So, but also thank you, Jordan, for continuing to fight, because without this information being out there, other people aren't going to know what to do when it happens to them, because there's no way that it's only going to stick to these, few cities, which then if you start to add it all up, it's a lot more than just a few.
Well,
so
let me tell the audience, because we still have over 500 people watching. I am writing a book, but I could write a separate book just on my dealings with the media when it came to Flint. So there's a story I've been working on. I've had it done basically for a year. It sat with one outlet who originally told me yes, then told me no. So I reached out to an outlet that I've published with before the other day. I don't want to get into full details because I'm still going to shop it around. But basically, I have documents showing that a internal official in former Governor Rick Snyder's administration, a high-level official who the governor was, close with, this official, I don't want to say too much, but you know who I'm talking about, who had warned his administration, you need to switch Flint, get it off the Flint River. This is toxic. Soon after the water switch, but they threatened her and silenced her to shut the fuck up, basically, that I have information and documents showing that this person was directly meeting with the governor at the same time that this person was warning the governor's top officials. You would think that's newsworthy, particularly on the 9-year anniversary that Snyder, whose criminal charges were just tossed because of the current attorney general, a Democrat, Dana Nessel's incompetence, his and 8 other defendants, their criminal charges were tossed because the Michigan Supreme Court, in a unanimous decision, it wasn't political, I think it was 6-0, Democrats and Republican judges, ruled that the current attorney general, who fired the original prosecution team, calling them incompetent, the current attorney general, they filed the indictments in violation of the Michigan Constitution, apparently, the Supreme Court says. So anyway, I brought it to that outlet that I have evidence that a high-level official who was sounding the alarm soon after the water switch, Flint needs to get off the Flint River and move back to the Detroit water system. If they would have listened, you could have saved a lot of lives. That at the same time, this person had direct meetings with Governor Snyder every week, meaning this person, it's very likely, had warned the governor long before he claims he knew anything about it. We're talking a year and a half early. This large media outlet says to me, this is great information, but it's a little too specific for us. Okay. I wrote, what does that mean, a little too specific? You want me to dumb it down for a third grader? They were like, no, it's great information, but we would want something more like on a broader theme, like on how are residents water now, or digging into the cancer cluster. I said, yeah, I could do that too. But don't you think evidence that the former governor of Michigan, whose criminal charges were just tossed, might have been warned by a top official? And I'm being vague, but once the story is out, you will see this is a top official that it's very likely would have warned the governor. Don't you think specifics would be good in this instance? No, we don't want that. I
have something else for you. I found out
the
today.
Excuses and the twisted rationalizations and the twist myself into a human fucking pretzels that I've gotten from the Daily Beast, the New York Times, the Washington Post, NBC News, BuzzFeed, who else? PBS, ABC. It just, there's a longer list, but those, it just boggles the fucking mind. It boggles the mind. And the truth is, because I don't care what their excuses are, the truth is they don't care because it was 9 years ago. That's the truth. They don't care because it happened a long time ago. They don't care because most of them live in New York and DC and make six figures. They don't care because most of them don't even know the story. Even the outlets that have been good enough to publish some of my reporting, Vice, The Intercept, The Guardian, Detroit Metro News, I had to really spoon feed it to the editors because they knew bullet points of the story. They didn't really know, and that's okay. But it's already I wrote it, Arlene. But the problem is the reason I'm being honest to the audience, and Melissa knows this. The reason that I worked so hard to get it published at bigger outlets, we're a small independent outlet. The information I have is based on confidential documents from a criminal investigation. So you need to have legal protection, not because I did anything wrong, but you need to have legal protection when you publish things that if you're subpoenaed, I would never give up a source, but just if you're subpoenaed or if there was a court action, it could bankrupt a small media company like Status Coup. So that's why I would love to publish these things on my own, but we don't have, $200,000 for lawyers. If you want to give us that with no strings attached, feel free to email me at info@statuscoup.com. But the point is, and it's good to get bigger outlets too, to get more eyeballs. Hopefully one day we're as big as those outlets. But it's just mind-boggling to me. And I've literally had one editor that I'm friends with tell me that I would publish it, but my boss won't. And the reason is they don't think there's enough bang for your buck, meaning for the amount of time that would go into editing, legal, checking it, blah, blah, blah. They don't think it would go viral enough or whatever. And I said, well, let me tell you, I've been to Flint. Next week, I think I got to count. I think it's trip 19. Probably the only reason Status Coup is still in business is because of Flint, among other things, because part of how we've built the paid membership is staying on these stories that no one else is covering. So you're wrong. People do care. There is not a niche audience for these things. The masses care. They just don't know because you're not telling them. They don't know because you're not telling them. So sorry for my soapbox. But anyway, 9 years later, the water's still contaminated. As you and others have told me, their eyes still burn in the shower. People are still getting rashes. It smells, not to mention Medicare for all, not a thing in Flint. Not to mention the Democratic governor has abandoned you. So we have a Republican administration that poisoned you. The Democratic administration said they were going to bring you justice. How are they doing on that?
Yeah, they threw all of the tort cases, some that were even moving forward to trial for manslaughter, in the trash, said they were going to do better. And then I had to go on the news defending the constitutional rights of the people that poisoned me because the new prosecution team violated their constitutional rights and the cases all got tossed in the trash, which that was an interesting moral twist there. That was fun. Water still giving people nosebleeds, still discoloring, still dislodging, lead levels keep bouncing, systems unstable because they've not fixed the problem, which is replacing infrastructure. And now we do not have a director of public works who would be over the water treatment. He retired and said, I'm out of here, because he lives in Flint and is a chemist and it didn't work. So he lasted less than 2 years, or right around 2 years. And yes, we have nobody in control right now. We don't have a mayor. We have a mayor. He's just only shows up for good media press and pictures and then disappears. So we're left on our own to do the work, and about ready, you just do it ourselves. But we are continuing to go check on our neighbors, make sure that their pipes are getting replaced like they're supposed to. But still, it doesn't count the copper pipes. It doesn't count the distribution mains and interior plumbing because our laws don't cover that. So water's still bad. No one's in jail. Lots of people are dead, and it's going to continue to happen across the country unless we get fixed right, because they are copying the playbook on how to sweep Flint under the rug and using it in all of these other disasters. So we need to edit that playbook and make it right for the people. And yeah, we appreciate you. Also, a little tidbit, make you happy. Found out that Snyder's got a new business, and former Governor Snyder's got a new business, and he's getting contracts from former Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley, who is still in the Whitmer cabinet. You like that? Can't have the wealthy people not getting their money for poisoning people. I don't know if anybody can hear my dog snoring in the background. I'm sorry, that's not me. That's the dog snoring. But also, my God. Yeah, so, and they're so blatant. And then when we say something about it online, because I love tearing people up on Twitter, I get called an electronic terrorist and a lot of other things too. But yeah, when you point this out, and then I get called uncivilized and stuff by the former governor that, poisoned my whole entire family in my city, said that I was uncivilized because I was unhappy about him teaching a class on civility in government at Harvard. So we got that shut down. So we're just meanies. We're big meanies and electronic terrorists, whatever that means. I'm like, okay, sure, because I'm mean to you on Twitter. My bad. Let me worry about your feelings there, sir. But the cool thing about it is we just had another town hall about the pipes. People are still pissed, which is wonderful to see that kind of energy, because we are extremely tired and sick and over it. But we're trying to work on ways to connect with other poison cities and do demonstrations. Our former mayor just went down to Jackson, and she's going back again to help down there and stuff. And so we're doing everything that we can to keep it alive and protect one another, but also try to help these other cities that are going through these disasters, because they're no different than what's been happening to us. And, we would like to lead with amazing things like our environmental movement and our pushback and fight, not lead in getting, swept under the rug and left to die, because we're not cool with that. And we're not cool with that happening to anybody else. And we're too mean to, go anywhere and give up. And so we're going to keep also supporting you, because your book is some good stuff, and you've got some amazing things that people just are either too dumb to understand, or they think the public is too stupid to understand. And I think that's what it is. And they're not connected. These mainstream media, they're not connected at all with the public, so they wouldn't know what people would be interested in anyways, because they don't care and they don't talk to people. But I just appreciate you continuing to humanize what's happening here, because I think that that's what reaches people the most, is that one, reminding me that I'm human and that my life matters. Thank you. And that Flint lives matter, and East Palestine lives matter. Nobody voted to be poisoned, and nobody should have to suffer like this. And that we do matter, and it's not okay, and it's a crime to poison people. Well,
I won't get into it, but needless to say, a couple years ago, they did try to shut me up for covering this. You know about that. There was let's just say I was working on some things that might have not been good for the governor and his friends. And all of a sudden, there was a lot of things thrown my way. But what I will say is, I think it's just human nature that whether you're the residents or the journalists covering it, people spiritually, physically, mentally, you get drained after 9 years. And cynicism starts to sink in, and hopelessness sunk in long before 9 years ago. And you just kind of, in a lot of ways, you accept your fate. And the residents, I'm not going to the protests, or I'm not getting on the bus to the Capitol, and I'm not doing this. Not because you don't care, but because how much fight can you actually have in you when you're also being screwed on 20 other things unrelated to the water. And that's where the capitalist class wants you. They want you beaten down physically, mentally, spiritually. That's where the oligarchy wants you. That's where the government officials want you, Republican, Democrat. And I think there are a whole lot of people in Flint that are still fighting. Even just showing up to city council once in a while, or showing up on an anniversary, or being on social media and saying it's still not fixed. And I think it's all of our responsibility, whether you're a journalist, just watching, to stand up for the people in Flint or East Palestine, which obviously is not as long. And we hope it doesn't go this long, because at the end of the day, if there is no and there's never going to be full justice because people have died and people are permanently injured. Kids are permanently injured. Adults are permanently injured, not to mention the deaths. But if there is no justice in terms of legal justice, financial justice, healthcare justice, environmental justice, this is the playbook. And they're showing you in East Palestine that they're looking to what happened in Flint. Oh, these people who poisoned Flint, they got away with it, so we'll do the same thing. We're not going to pause or think twice because you could poison a whole town, whether it's the government doing it, corporations doing it, government and corporations doing it together. So that's why I stay on this, besides the fact that, I have sat on porches with kids who can't count to 10 anymore. I've talked to kids who don't know the alphabet anymore. I've talked to people in their 40s that unfortunately look like they're in their 70s. I don't have certain people to interview anymore that I used to love to interview because they're dead now. And I have a problem with people being poisoned, whether 9 days ago or 9 years ago, and it being covered up and then them being slowly left to die when I turn on the TV, and that's not what's being shown. But the GOP horse race for 2024 is being shown, and the latest on Trump is being shown, and all the trivial substances bullshit that passes for news these days. I'm not saying only cover Flint or only cover East Palestine, but the outlets with hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in resources, CNN, NBC, ABC, CBS, the multi-billion-dollar corporate media complex, they got a whole lot more resources. They choose not to cover it because they're choosing to cover it up. So that's why we keep covering it, because trust me, going to Flint in a week, we're probably going to lose money, not make money. It's going to cost more for me, a camera person, to drive, the hotels, the food, all of it. It doesn't go viral. YouTube will, YouTube's algorithm will push Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro or whatever reactionary bullshit. Not Flint is still poison. Same with Twitter, same with Facebook. They don't push in their algorithm this kind of stuff. That's why it's so important, if you have it in your wallet, to sign up as a member to Status Coup, because we don't take money from Norfolk Southern or Goldman Sachs or Exxon or Big Pharma or big real estate or Silicon Valley or the military industrial complex or name your corrupt ghouls. Our funding is directly from the people, small dollar memberships. So if you can, sign up, statuscoup.com/join. You could sign up for $5 to $10 a month. That's how we support the on-the-ground reporting. We're trying to send Lewis back to East Palestine also in the beginning of May. I'm not just going to Flint. I'm going to go to Kalamazoo, which is also being poisoned by toxic gas. Can't keep up. I'm pretty much going to have to wear a hazmat suit soon, wherever I go. Anyway, thank you, Melissa, for giving us your expertise on for East Palestine and for Flint. And where could people look if they want the latest on Flint, what you're doing, how to link up with you, tell people where they can find more information?
You can find me. I'm Flintgate on Twitter, and that's where I'm the biggest jerk. But the grassroots group that I work with, Flint Rising, you can go to flintrising.com. That's where you can support our program, support the people, and what we're doing as we, try to fix Flint and all of the other communities we're working to support too. And it helps us get out to help them as well, and then also going door to door to help our own people. So yeah, we appreciate it, and of course, sharing what we're putting out, especially with the anniversary coming up, and we dread it. Every single one of us are dreading it. And what do we do? How do we, celebrate or fight? It's a lot, and it's never enough. But yeah, the biggest thing is, share the stories from the people. And Jordan's one of the few people, Status Cou's the few people that actually uplift the stories from the people. Because all too well, I keep hearing stories about Flint and how we're recovering from people who don't even live in the state. And I'm like, wow, thanks for that. That's what planet do you live on? So please support the people that are in directly impacted communities. Those are the voices you need to hear. Those are the experts on the ground that you need to hear from, and support the independent media that actually uplifts their voices, their needs, and what is actually happening, because you're not going to get that anywhere else. So thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. Be well.
See you soon.
Let me read some super chats. Alex loves $9.99. Love Status Cou's work. Jordan, discovered you way back on TYT, and I'm grateful for your coverage, starting way back with Flint's water crisis. Flint still needs clean water. Proud to be a Patreon sub. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate your support. Stacy 999, great reporting with a heart. Thank you. Humorous, $50. Holy cow. Thank you, Humorous. Look, folks, if you come to the show and stay even 10 minutes, it's just common courtesy. Press that like button. It's free, folks. And where is anywhere else talking about the poor people in a town that most people don't even know exists? You're damn right. As far as I know, it's ourselves, Squirrel Tribe, which is a YouTube channel, has covered East Palestine and other communities that are being poisoned in a variety of ways. So credit to her for her coverage. Other than that, I don't really know many outlets that are still covering East Palestine. Definitely not Flint. And by the way, it would probably be more profitable for us if we covered other things and just did reactionary bullshit. But I'm not in this to become a YouTube star and, become a millionaire. I want to lift up communities and voices that are being covered up, really, by the mainstream media. So thank you, as always, Humorous. Tony Dallas, $10. Great reporting, Jordan. Can't believe this BS that the CDC is pushing. This is real journalism, not Twitter war trash. Hope the guests will be better health. God bless. Yes, I will stay in touch with Eric and update you guys. Carpe diem, $5. Please bring on Steve Grumbine to talk about MMT, Jackson, Flint, Richmond, East Palestine. The federal government has the money to fix all this. Do you have your calendar out? Steve Grumbine is on tomorrow, on Tuesdays. So Steve will be on. Thank you. Dave L., $10. When the hopelessness creeps in, just remember, you don't always fight because you're going to win. Sometimes you fight because you're really good at holding a grudge. Yes, I agree. And, I also think you got to fight because whether you win or not, the only chance you have at even the smallest of victories is if we all keep fighting. Because the smallest victories we get against this corrupt cesspool that is the United Corporations of America take years of fighting. I know everybody wants to topple the system overnight. It didn't get this corrupt overnight, and we're not going to topple the system overnight. Sorry to tell you. So you got to keep fighting, because if not, what's the point? Why cover or talk about any of this if we're all going to give up? Thank you for watching. I really appreciate the super chats. Please consider signing up as a Status Coup member, statuscoup.com/join. You can become a member for as low as $5 a month. It is really, really the only way we could survive long-term. So if it's within your means, sign up, statuscoup.com/join. I'm putting it in the super chat. Consider signing up. $5-10 a month. You get great perks as a member as well, including our monthly Zoom call for members, among other perks. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.